I am Sam Fredrickson. Who are you? Isn't that an awkward question? Some nervous laughter here. I think that question actually is a very judgmental question at its root. And I challenge you sometime to practice saying, who are you, without sounding judgmental. Who are you? Who are you? Who are you? The question we need to ask, though, is who am I? It's a very different question. It invites self-reflection. It invites discovery. It invites clarity. It can invite shame, so be careful with the question. But even that shame can help bring about a truer understanding of the person we are. So we're CEOs in the education business. And as CEOs in the education business, we are keenly aware of the power of relationship. We've probably seen educators who have the most authentic, deepest relationships with students are also the educators that have the best learning in their classroom, the deepest learning. But how can anyone enter into an authentic relationship if they don't know who they are? Not what they are, because that's all about labels, that's all about assumptions, but who you are. Now, I have a talent. And I see some people smiling, but it's nothing to be happy about. It's actually, no one should be jealous of this talent. It's exhausting. I have the ability to make people feel comfortable making fun of me. My friends, my colleagues at this middle table, sometimes my staff, but most notably my family, my loving family. And they make fun of me for all sorts of things. But since Rachel's going to cut me off after a few minutes, I only get to tell you about one. Of course, John would let me go on for 20 minutes because that's how he leads by example. But Rachel's who I trust. I cry at movies, but not all movies. I love watching movies, but there's certain ones I always cry at. And they're movies that have a redemption scene, movies that are about someone's redemption. Now you might be thinking, I'm talking about some pretty deep Academy Award-winning movies. No, I'm talking about Pixar. I'm talking about Up. I'm talking about The Incredibles. I couldn't even talk about Toy Story 3 for many months after watching it. Think about Darth Vader at the end of Return of the Jedi. Here's one you may know. I am Iron Man. All right, a woot. Iron Man deserves woots. I also think that a redemption scene in a movie is where someone decides who they're going to be, and they put all other options to death. I learned that at MESPA Institute. That's what decide means. But I had to think about that word redemption. What is it that causes me to have such strong emotions that the tears continually well up whenever I see those scenes? It certainly has a religious connotation, but I don't necessarily watch religious movies. And the conclusion I came to is a redemption story is really a story about someone becoming more of who they are, more authentic, more real, more human. And the redemption scene is just the moment that all happens. Now, arguably, one of the most famous redemption stories is found in Les Miserables. The main character, Jean Valjean, has been in prison for 19 years because he stole a loaf of bread to feed a starving family. And as he's being released, the police inspector, Javert, refers to him as prisoner 24601, a dehumanizing label with assumptions behind it. He calls him a thief, another label with a whole heap more assumptions. And Valjean proclaims, "My name is Jean Valjean. Yes, and I am Javert. Do not forget my name, 24601. As the story goes on, Valjean has to wrestle with that question, who am I? He broke parole, he ended up stealing, he was forgiven by a kindly bishop, but the label was too much for him. It caused him to think that's who he was. And the bishop forgives him, but he calls him friend, and he calls him brother. And these two can be labels, but in this context, and more importantly, they're relational titles. So he's wrestling with this question, who am I? This man's been arrested. They think he's me. I broke parole. This guy's going to prison. If I let him go, I don't have to worry anymore, but I lose who I am. If I turn myself in, this guy goes free, I go to prison, and I get to remain who I am. In the end, he does stand in front of Javert and say, I am 24601, And then he runs away to avoid prison. Otherwise, the movie's over. I mean, come on. He had to run away. But interestingly, after that scene, he's not given any more labels. He doesn't even call himself Valjean anymore. He's only called Father and Papa by his adopted daughter. Again, these are relational titles that invite connection, and they invite invitation. Names are important. Relationships are important. Labels are not. So we're all principals, and I ask you, is principal a label or a relational title? We pour meaning into our names with our actions and with our words. What do you want your name to conjure up for students 5, 10, 20 years after you work with them? Guess what? Your name will conjure up emotions. You need to decide what meaning you want your name to have. And MESPA ends in a few hours, and many of us have short drives, many of us have long drives getting home. We have the weekend. Hopefully you have a great, wonderful weekend. Learning is hard. I'm tired after the Institute. But on Monday, we go back to our schools and we go back to our students. Is student a label or a relational title? And when we get back to our students, how will we know who they are? Are we going to label them? The gifted kid, the smart kid, the ADHD kid, the EBD kid, the smart one, the musician. The list of labels we give our kids is almost endless. But like Valjean, our students are yelling out, I am Ahmed, I am Sua, I am Claire, I am Dwight. But they don't have the 40 years of experience refining and defining who they are like Valjean had. The label 24601 was too much for him. It almost consumed him. We cannot dare do that to our students. We cannot let the labels we give them consume who they are. So I have to leave you with one last movie reference. In the Marvel movie Black Panther, T'Challa, who is the king and Black Panther of Wakanda, is in hand-to-hand combat for the throne. As he's beginning to lose, his mother yells out from the crowd, "Show him who you are!" And he does. And if you've seen the movie, you know that he shows the whole world who he is. And it was a really good thing. So I leave you with the same advice. Show them who you are. And you won't have to explain yourself. And they won't have to label you. Thanks for being here.